Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative, where we'll be looking at A Little Princess, written by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Now, it was published as a book in 1905, but it is an expanded version of a short story, Sarah Crewe, or What Happened at Miss Minchin's, which was serialised in St Nicholas magazine from December 1887, and then it was published in book form in 1888. It was then adapted to screen in 1995, and we'll be looking at three things. So we'll be looking at how good is the book, how good is the film, and how good is the plot. Now, don't forget, guys, to click subscribe button and to click like on this video as well, so you'll be alerted whenever a new video comes out. So the film. Now, this film is one of mine and my sister Nikki's favourite films. That and Secret Garden, which obviously I've done as a much earlier episode. They are absolutely just magical little gems in this world, and I grew up with this film, and it is absolutely just gorgeous. It ages so well, it makes you cry, it makes you laugh, and it just makes you feel so complete by the end that you're sat there going, ah, you feel good, you feel like you've had a good sort of like cleansing period, as it were. Now, it is set during World War I and deals with the loss of a little girl's father and how she keeps her heart pure despite everything that goes on around her, despite being treated like absolute garbage by the person in charge of the house, Miss Minchin, because she no longer has money. I love the blending of the story that Sarah's telling the children at the school, and how it reflects what's going on in her life as well. So, you know, you've got the princess, and you've got the prince, and you've got the death, and then you've got the revival, and you've got, oh, it's just honestly, and those little scenes, beautifully done, absolutely beautifully done. Now, as I said, despite being released in 1995, it has really stood the test of time. The characters are so well portrayed, they age really well. It's not a case if you sit there and go, really shouldn't be, you know, talking about that, but it honestly is absolutely beautiful. This story is one of heartbreak but goodness in pure souls of children, and it is a precious gem that anybody should watch. And the fact that it keeps repeating that all girls are princesses, no matter what they are, no matter what they do, no matter who they are, it is honestly beautiful. I urge anyone to watch this film, and this film gets a 10 out of 10 for me. Don't give it often, but 10 out of 10 for me. Now, this book. Now, Frances Hodgson Burnett, again, she's the one that did Secret Garden as well. Who knew? But she is such a beautiful writer, like a brilliant writer. And I love the narrative. I love how it follows such a precious and peculiar young lady. Now, in the book, we meet Sarah when she's younger, and as she ages, and then she gets to the age that we kind of see her in the film. And it's just so beautifully done. I love the way that she looks at what will happen if a child is left with no one and no money and no future, and it is just one of goodness, because Sarah keeps exactly who she is. She doesn't change to make anybody happy. She always just has this little way of defying people, and it's amazing. You know, it builds on the magic and the dreams and the reality of a life. So everybody dreams about having a slightly better life. God knows we all do. We all sit there and go, if money, you know, and I really hate when people say money can't buy you happiness. It probably can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you, you know, financial stability, being able to turn your heating on, being able to look after those that you love. And yet this looks at, she has no money. So she's having to work now, whereas before she had loads of money and that's all she ever knew. But instead of her being a spoiled little rich kid when she had the money, she wasn't. She was lovely and sweet and caring, because that's how she was raised. And she was even quite generous with the money. And then when she has nothing, she builds on this reality, and she tries to build the magic, and she tries to get herself in a situation where she goes, no, I am a princess, and princesses act like this. They won't always have the money. Do you know what I mean? And it's so lovely to watch, and heartbreaking to read as well. And honestly, you're pulled along with the current of this story. You can't turn off, you can't switch down. And I kind of picked it up, and I just carried on reading, and I couldn't really put this book down. So I honestly recommend this book, and this book gets a 10 out of 10 for me as well. Now the plot. Now the book starts with Sarah in a carriage with her father in London, reminiscing about living in India not so long ago, and she's on her way to Miss Minchin's school for girls. Now, in the book, she goes to the school because that is what happens when little girls reach of an age. They go away to these boarding schools and everything. In the film, however, it starts with Sarah in India and then moving across to America to stay at Miss Minchin's school for girls. But the reason she goes to the school is because her father has been called up to fight in World War One. So in both, Captain Crew leaves Sarah in Miss Minchin's care with her new doll companion, Emily. And, you know, he kind of goes off to war in the film and back home to India in the book. Now things are a little grander in the book. She has a maid and she has a very extravagant wardrobe, and she is also only 7 in the book at the beginning, but apparently wise beyond her years. Now in the film I thought she was maybe 10, 11, and she actually does become that age later on in the book. It does kind of age over a couple of years and she becomes the age that she is in the film. So in both you get the scene where Miss Minchin is telling Sarah that she must learn French. And Sarah's trying to say, oh, no, but I don't need French lessons. And Miss Minchin's like, oh, no, every girl learns how to speak French. But, you know, proper kicking off. So she introduces Sarah to the French teacher. And Sarah speaks perfect French to the French teacher, like absolutely perfect. And the French teacher is just like, there is nothing I can teach her. This girl is practically French. She could probably help teach you French. Which pisses off Miss Minchin, because she don't like being showed up by anybody. Now in the book, this little scene is in class in front of everybody. In the film, however, it's kind of on the stairs before she goes down to breakfast. So, you know, I probably would have preferred to see it in front of everybody just to see Miss Minchin get a comeuppance. But she does. Miss Minchin gets a comeuppance. Now in both, she becomes friends with a little girl called Ermengarde. Now Ermengarde is sort of like described as being a little rounder, you know, with glasses and like hair, like just sort of like a bird's nest kind of hair. She's described as being a bit slow sometimes, and Sarah just becomes friends with her straight away, and looks after her and protects her, and it's so sweet. And she also becomes friends with a little girl called Lottie. Now this is because in both, Miss Amelia, who's Miss Minchin's sister, has the job of calming down Lottie, and Lottie is quite a young child and learned very early on that if she huffed and puffed and screamed and shouted, she could get exactly what she wanted. And so she has temper tantrums. So then Sarah comes along and goes, you know, why are you screaming? I haven't got a mummy. And Sarah's like, I haven't got a mummy either. And then she tells Lottie the most beautiful little story about angels and everything, and it calms Lottie down, and Lottie becomes sort of like an adopted child to Sarah, as it were. Now again, bear in mind that in the book Sarah at this point is 7 and Lottie can't be much younger, but she becomes sort of like she clings on to Sarah, and Sarah becomes like the unofficial Lottie wrangler, as it were. So then in the book she meets the servant girl Becky after being there for 2 years. In the film, it's straight away, but in both, she's still really nice, really caring, doesn't see any kind of difference between her and Becky at all, sees no difference. Now, in the book, and like, I'm not trying to sort of like bring up a race card, but in the book, there's no sort of like, I imagined her to be white, but I think that they turned her black in the film. But I think this worked quite well because this showed even more the compassion and the lack of how am I trying to say it? Basically, Sarah is just a nice human being. She doesn't see colours. She doesn't see class. She doesn't see, you know, rich, poor. She doesn't see, you know, I'm better than you. And she becomes friends with this serving girl straight away. And I'm kind of glad that they made that decision because it's a little bit more poignant than if she'd have just been, you know, a little white serving girl. And it's honestly, she's so sweet to this little girl, Becky. But anyway, so in both she loves to tell stories, and she does so to all the other girls, and Becky kind of listens in every now and then. And then we get to Sarah's birthday celebrations. And these are put out, and it's a beautiful big spread, and everyone's celebrating her birthday, and it's just a big event. And then we find out that Captain Crew has unfortunately died. And so there will be no more money. Well, Miss Minchin finds out that there'll be no more money. So in the book, he dies of jungle fever, and the diamond mines that he'd supposedly invested in comes out saying that they're not real, and it's lost him his fortune. In the film, he is counted as one of the dead of his regiment, and so his assets are frozen by the government. So Sarah now has to work at the school as she is penniless and alone. And the way Miss Minchin deals with Sarah is horrific. This girl, on her birthday, just found out that her dad is dead. Miss Minchin stops the birthday celebration straight away, only cares about whether or not she's getting paid. Then she basically tells Sarah that she's a servant and she can't play with anybody and she can't have anything. And then basically, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I can't believe she doesn't get away with it, but it is horrible. So now Sarah lives in the attic with Becky, and she's bossed about. She's sent on all sorts of errands, and then Ermengarde comes across Sarah and she starts crying because she thinks that Sarah doesn't want to be her friend anymore. And Ermengarde, Sarah's basically her only friend. So Sarah's then like, oh, this isn't the case, and she realizes that actually she's being a little bit selfish. I mean, I say selfish, she's really not, but she thinks she's being a bit selfish in the fact that she then assumed that none of the girls would want to be friends with her because she's a servant, so she stopped being friends with them to make it easier for them, and then she realises that actually that's not the case at all. So Ermengarde becomes a friend again, and starts listening to her stories again, and so does Lottie. Lottie comes back up again. So Sarah also becomes a friend with a little rat in the book as well, which is quite cute. And kind of coaxes him, and it shows her sweet nature, because I mean, anybody else seeing a rat in a damp attic would scream and run and hide, but she becomes friends with him, of course, because this is Sarah Crewe. Now, a little difference in the book is the house next door is empty for quite a long time. However, in the film, it is occupied by an older gentleman whose son has had to go to war as well and is now missing in action, and an Indian gentleman who was there as a companion to the older man. So in the book, Sarah is given a sixpence by a family she's taken time to observe in their house, and they in turn start observing her. So basically this little boy gives her the sixpence, but she's sort of like, this is the large family, and her way of imagining and dealing with what she's dealing with is by looking in these windows of these houses and seeing these families and going, this is what their story is and this is what their story is. But they realise that she's not quite the servant because she speaks nicely and she holds herself properly. And it's really, really sweet. So they kind of start, having a look at her as well. In the film, she's given the money by some random boy. So in the book, a very ill gentleman moves in next door with an Indian aide with him. And she starts wondering if he's okay and everything like that, because obviously he's very ill, he's almost skeletal, and he's come to London to try and get himself back to normal. In the film now, Sarah's dad, we realise he is alive, and he's taken in by the older gentleman who lives next door and the Indian gentleman, because he was in the regiment of the older gentleman's missing in action son, and they think, if we bring him back to health, it might help. So we say where this is going. At least we know Sarah's dad is alive in the film. Unfortunately, he doesn't come back to life in the book. He is dead and gone. I was hoping that he wouldn't be, but he is 100% dead and gone. So anyway, in both, she ends up making friends with the monkey, who hangs out next door. And keeps coming into the house. And because she's got a kind nature, she loves everything. Now, in the book, we find out that the the sickly gentleman that's just moved in next door, was in fact the business partner of Sarah's dad. And he's actually looking for Sarah to give her the fortune that she deserves, because it turns out the fortune actually was still intact and they actually made a mint on the diamond mines. But unfortunately, they were both suffering from jungle fever. And by the time, the business partner sort of like came back to his senses, Captain Crewe was dead and gone and buried. But in the film, as I said, we know the injured soldier is in fact Sarah's dad, but unfortunately his memory is gone due to the gas that he got stuck with. So in both, Sarah finds a coin in the gutter and goes to buy some buns from the baker. Now, when she realises that there was someone hungrier than her, she then shares the food. Now, in the book, this has a knock-on effect because she shares the food with this little girl that's like absolutely starving. The baker realizes and she takes pity on the little girl that Sarah shares the food with, and then we find out that the baker actually took on the little girl and has been feeding her and looking after her. In the film, it's the little girl of a flour seller, and she gives the bun to the family because she realizes that they are much hungrier than her. Again, you see, lovely person. But at this point, she's starting to become hungry, tired, and she's struggling to stay positive. So in the book, Ermengarde then realizes that she's got a hamper full of food. And so she's like, oh my God, like, I'm not going to eat it. Let's bring it up. Let's have a party. So she tries to bring it up for Becky and Sarah. However, they're caught by Miss Minchin and told that they will have no food the next day. Not going to happen. Now, in the film, Becky is caught by Miss Minchin doing something and is told no food for the next day. But Sarah has to do both her and Becky's chores the next day. And in the books, they have to do chores on empty stomachs. So anyway, Sarah and Becky then are pretending that they can see all this nice food and feel everything. And they go, oh yeah, no, can you see this food? Can you smell these sausages? Can you the warm velvet quilts and everything? And then as they fall asleep, the next door neighbour, the Indian gentleman in the film, but the Indian gentleman and the sick business partner in the book sort of prepare for all these goods to be moved across. So they then end up with all these nice things and food and everything, and it's really sweet. Now in the film, the same night that this happens, Miss Minchin comes up and sees the splendour in Sarah's room and believes that she's been stealing. So she locks Sarah and Becky up and calls the police. Now in the book, several days passed and Sarah even starts getting presents to the front door. Now this worries Miss Minchin because she believes that now Sarah's got a mysterious benefactor. So she starts stopping Sarah doing chores and starts getting her to teach in the classroom and letting her sit up front and eat with the children again. So then in the book, Sarah brings the monkey back over because he's escaped again. So in the book, Sarah brings the monkey back over to the Indian gentleman, and then it turns out that the Indian gentleman and the business partner realize that this is actually the girl they've been searching for. In the film, Sarah escapes from the attic and goes to the house next door because she's running from the police. So in the film, Sarah sees her father and tries to get him to remember who she is. Oh, it breaks my heart. It honestly breaks my heart when you see that. So then Miss Minchin comes over, sees Captain Crew, knows who it is, and still goes, this girl has no father. She's an orphan. So then as Sarah's being dragged out the front door, literally dragged out the front door by the police, you see him remember and he screams out her name and it's so heartbreaking. And then you can also see Miss Minchin realising that it's all over. Now in the book, Miss Minchin comes looking for Sarah to punish her, but is confronted with the truth of Sarah being wealthy again. Now the film ends with Miss Minchin's school being taken over by the elderly man from next door and her being turned out to work as a chimney sweep. And her sister has also run off with the milkman as well. So Becky, Sarah and her dad leave the school and everyone behind and go off to, I think it's India again. The book, however, ends with Sarah and Becky going to the bakery, asking for the lady to give away food to the hungry and send the bills to Sarah. And it's so sweet because then, Sarah's rescued, Becky's rescued, and it's so sweet. Now, in regards to the plot, it's very similar, sort of like in many places. The rise and fall of Sarah Crewe is almost identical. However, as I said, in the film it's World War I, in the book it is just due to jungle fever. Also, the fact that they brought back the dad in the film but not in the book is quite a big difference as well. And the fact that the book is set in London, England, but they moved over to America. I'm honestly sick of them doing that. If a book is set in a country, how hard is it to film it in that country? I've had several times where they've moved it for no apparent reason. But the complete resolution of Sarah to be a little princess the whole way through, and not like a little spoiled princess, but like a proper princess, is just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think everything that they pulled from the book into the film narrative is honestly amazing. So the plot gets a 6 out of 10 for me. So obviously this is my own opinion. Of course, I'm happy if you agree or disagree with anything that I've said. If there are any book to film adaptations that you'd like, leave it below in the comments. But thank you so much for watching, and remember to always keep it contento.